Tonight we're in Grimsby, and this is Question Time. And a big welcome to you listening, watching, to our audience here, of course, as ever, and to our panel. Tonight, the Conservative MP Nadhim Zahawi, founder, former chief executive of the polling company YouGov, Labour's former Home Secretary, Alan Johnson, the leader of UKIP, Nigel Farage, the businesswoman and winner of The Apprentice, Michelle Dewberry, and the writer and academic, Germaine Greer. Good. Thank you very much indeed. And as ever, if you want to join in this debate, you can text or tweet our hashtag BBCQT. You can follow us at BBC Question Time. You can text comments to 83981 and press the red button to see what others are saying. Let's have our first question, which comes from Tracy Coggan, please.
Is this government willing to intervene and rescue the UK steel industry?
Is this government willing to intervene and rescue the UK steel industry? And we are, of course, close to the steel industry that has just had losses of over, I think, a quarter of its staff in North Lincolnshire. Alan Johnson, you start on this.
They could be doing much, much more, that's for sure. The people in Scunthorpe, people in Redcar, people in Lanarkshire, this is a strategic industry for any country, a foundation industry. You need to have a steel industry, and it goes through cycles, and sometimes demand is up, sometimes demand is down. But if you lose your steel industry altogether, you lose a vital part of manufacturing. Now, there's three things the government should be doing, in my view. One is to look at business rates. Two is to look at energy costs. Three is to do more through the EU and the World Trade Organization to deal with dumping. Dumping is selling steel at below the cost that it took to make it. And China's not the only one dumping on the international market. Other countries are doing this. But China, 10 years ago, joined the World Trade Organization. And actually, dumping is against the rules of the WTO, let alone the rules of the EU. I've seen no action from government to deal with that. And I've seen no real attempt to have a strategy for dealing with this. The announcement the other day by the Minister that he's going to give £80 million to help the local communities, that's fine. Actually, about 40 million of that was already going to be given because of statutory redundancy rules. But there's much more. Governments are £80 million the cost that it took to make it. And China's not the only one dumping on the international market. Other countries are doing this. But China, 10 years ago, joined the World Trade Organization. And actually, dumping is against the rules of the WTO, let alone the rules of the EU. I've seen no action from government to deal with that, and I've seen no real attempt to have a strategy for dealing with this. The announcement the other day by the Minister that he's going to give £80 million to help the local communities, that's fine. Actually, about 40 million of that was already going to be given because of statutory redundancy rules. But there's much more governments are doing in Italy and France and Germany to protect their steel industries, and we should be doing that as well.
And could that save it? I mean, in the EU they say the problem is overproduction of steel across Europe.
Yes.
Those measures can save it?
Well, if you look at what's happened in those other European Union countries, and if you look at what the steel industry was asking for from the government, it was on issues like energy costs and like business rates. But the real issue here is whether we could... So in Redcar, the coke ovens have been closed. That means they'll never resume steel making again. In most cases where there's been a problem like this, they've kept the coke ovens working. A new company just opened in Newport that closed 3 years ago. This week for steel, it's been closed for 3 years, but they kept the coke ovens mothballed. Therefore, they could reopen when demand increased. The real tragedy in Redcar and Teesside, not Scunthorpe, but it's hard enough there, but in Redcar, they will never produce steel again, and the government could have done something about that.
Nadhim Zahawi.
I think Alan Johnson raises an important point about the global steel industry. Steel prices have gone from 2 years ago, $1,600 a tonne. Today it's sub $400. So this isn't just dumping from China, it's the Ukraine, it's India. It's happening because there's overcapacity. What the government has been doing is been working with the industry for many, many years. This isn't something that happened last week or the week before. On energy costs, Alan mentions that quite rightly, the government has already actually paid the industry about £50 million in effectively returning to them the cost of energy. Now,
hang on, that doesn't mean anything, returning the cost of energy. Do you mean making energy as cheap as it is in Germany or France?
Well, it means that those who use a lot of energy, the government has worked with them to make sure that they actually get a rebate back.
No, but look, we know the problem. The price of energy, electricity used is 9p a kilowatt, I am told, here in Britain, 4p in France. Or France.
Well, it means that those who use... Now,
hang on, that doesn't mean anything, returning the cost of energy. Do you mean making energy as cheap as it is in Germany or France?
Well, it means that those who use a lot of energy, the government has worked with them to make sure that they actually get a rebate back.
No, but look, we know the problem. The price of energy, electricity used is 9p a kilowatt, I am told, here in Britain, 4p in France. Have they brought those two together and made it the equivalent of 4p for the British steel industry?
What they've done already, as I said, is they've given back £50 million.
But how much is that? I mean, we can't... It's a vague figure. What is £50 million?
We need to bring down the cost of energy, and where Labour could help us is they don't vote for higher energy costs, as they did last week in the House of Lords. But back to what we're doing to help the industry, which is very important. There was a summit last week, cross-party, so the Labour MPs, which constituencies actually have these big steel manufacturers, were there, the unions were there, as well as, of course, the whole of the industry. And there are 3 strands of work. The first is procurement. The government is looking at more procurement. So the Crossrail project, 26 miles, that actually, because of legislation in the last Parliament, they could actually buy British steel. That's one area.
The other, they're allowed to avoid competition rules and say, well, we'll only use British steel?
They're allowed to look at procurement and be able to use British steel. That's the way they did it. We're looking at competitiveness, which you raised, David, i.e. what more can we do to make our industry competitive, and then, of course, what's happening elsewhere in the world. What are other countries doing without breaking state aid rules that we can look at to help the industry? And, of course, the most important bit, which is those people who are being made redundant, we're looking at training of those people, making sure that money does flow to help them get a job. A lot of them, by the way, are actually highly skilled. So the 80 million that Sajid Javid, Secretary of State, has put towards training those people is right, and we'll be doing much more on this to make sure that we...
Just to bring it just briefly to the key question, can this government rescue the UK steel industry? Are you saying now that the steel industry in Britain can continue to thrive after this? That this is just a hiccup?
Well, look,
is that what you're saying?
In any industry, right, what you get is oversupply, prices come crashing down. Some people were the example of SSI, where the company simply couldn't keep going any longer. Others, like Tata, who I think will be much more responsible. There'll be, I'm sure, some voluntary redundancies. I don't know whether they're going to go any further than that. I hope not. But essentially, once the supply catches up, or the demand catches up with the supply, you'll see prices rising again. It applies to any commodity around the world. And I think we will end up with having a robust industry in the UK. Alan mentioned the company that's just opened after 3 years. That's because they're specialists. They were niche manufacturing. That's the sort of
stop them closing 3 years.
All right, Michelle.
Yeah, so we need to be clear. So we're talking a lot about stats and statistics, but I work a lot with people, getting them back into employment, and there's a real human cost in us letting this industry decline. There are huge amounts of people And the problem that you've got in these towns and cities when you've got monopolised employers, what you have is you've got grandparents, fathers, sons. All they've ever done is work in these plants. And this is a crisis for me. So do I think the government has and is doing enough? No, I don't, actually. I think that this problem has not just suddenly crept upon us. This has not just happened last week. We've known that the market prices of steel have been on decline for quite some time now. We could have stepped in, you know, beforehand.
The government's been working with the industry for years.
Yes, but
it's
obviously not working. And if it was working, I'll tell you now, SSI wouldn't have finished. Tata wouldn't be standing there saying, help me, you know, we're about to put job losses out there. And for me, this is... We need to be saying more than we will cap business rates, we will compensate energy. We need to be saying we are doing this and we are doing that and we have done this.
We've done
and it needs to be more
50
active.
million in energy.
Okay. Let me hear from one or two members of the audience and then I'll come to the other members of the panel. You, sir, in the second row from the back there. No, the man in blue there, yes.
How can we have a northern powerhouse without a steelworks? Where's the money from the sale of British steel, and why can't we buy it back? I'm a local business owner. I work in mechanical engineering, and I believe that I would accept extra £5,000 on the corporation tax if it meant we could gain our steelworks and our mechanical and manufacturing back into British hands, not invested by foreign people who... Yes, it's great to have foreign investment, but do they really care about the human impact?
Would you nationalise it? Is that what you're saying?
I would nationalise it, 100%.
Nigel Farage, would you like to see steel nationalised?
I'd like to see steel operating and vibrant. And the answer to the question that Tracy asked, is the government willing to intervene? It can't intervene. Why? Because its hands are tied.
Yeah.
Yes, of course, commodity prices. I spent 20 years buying and selling metals, and you get oversupply in a market, and in a few years' time, the steel price will recover. That is the argument actually for intervening and for helping out in the short term. But, Alan, please, don't tell us we can help Tata Steel just a few miles from here with their business rates. North Lincolnshire County Council tried to do that, and their boss admitted today they are not allowed to relieve the £15 million a year business rates. No. She said it this afternoon. Perhaps you're behind. I don't know.
Yeah.
I spent 20 years buying and selling metals, and you get oversupply in a market, and in a few years' time, the steel price will recover. That is the argument actually for intervening and for helping out in the short term. But, Alan, please, don't tell us we can help Tata Steel just a few miles from here with their business rates. North Lincolnshire County Council tried to do that, and their boss admitted today they are not allowed to relieve the £15 million a year business rates. No. She said it this afternoon. Perhaps you're behind. I don't know.
The Conservative leader of...
They cannot provide any rate relief because of EU rules. Sajid Javid was asked the very same question, the business secretary. What could he do to help the steel industry through its short-term mess? He said because of EU state aid rules, absolutely nothing. We have burdened not just the steel industry, but all our heavy manufacturing with huge energy costs. European policy on this has been deeply misguided, and we're seeing heavy industry closing all over Europe. But the Germans aren't stupid, and they do act in their own national interest. And what Merkel has started to do is a massive programme of building coal-fired power stations.
Sorry, are you saying that Germany acts outside the rules of the EU, despite being the most powerful country in the EU?
It's very interesting. The Eggborough power station in Yorkshire closed last year. Ferry Bridge is about to close. Kingsnorth in Kent closed last year. We're told because of EU rules, if you drive from Belgium into Germany, you will see they are constructing and now burning coal on a huge scale.
Well, therefore, sorry to interrupt, you're saying it's perfectly feasible within the EU
because they've managed
to do these things.
They've managed to get round the rules.
Don't need to leave the
They've
EU.
managed to get round the rules. They've managed to get round the rules. For some reason we haven't. We have got energy, which British industry is now, because of George Osborne, bringing in a carbon floor and deciding that we would subsidise rich landowners to put wind turbines on their land. We have now got energy costs that are double the rest of the EU, and this isn't. This isn't. Just one more point. This isn't just about steel. In the last 8 years, we've lost 40,000 jobs in the aluminium industry, 60,000 jobs in steel, 10,000 jobs in refining. We've lost jobs in glass. We've lost jobs in cement. We're destroying British heavy industry. It is madness.
Okay. And I'll come to you in the audience just a minute.
The odd thing about this is that I'm Australian and we don't have a steel industry. We produce the highest grade ore, iron ore, in the world, and we have one customer, and our customer is China.
And I'll come to you in the audience just a minute.
The odd thing about this is that I'm Australian and we don't have a steel industry. We produce the highest grade ore, iron ore, in the world, and we have one customer, and our customer is China. And China's economy overheated. China ends up with a stockpile of steel, and it's interesting that China is now being accused of dumping when, in fact, I seem to remember a time when everyone was very enthusiastic about globalisation, which meant that if people could produce things cheaper, we wanted to buy the cheaper goods, and if that meant we mothballed our own industries, then that's what we did. And now we're whinging and complaining, and I really don't see that we should all now decide to produce steel which is actually uneconomic. That's a bad idea, and it won't work. Until the stockpile is used, it will continue to undercut us, and we will continue to call it dumping when in fact it's just marketing. I don't approve of globalisation. I think it's been a disastrous policy for, in particular, the developing nations. But we accepted it, everyone was very excited about it, and now we're whinging and complaining that it's begun to bite. Our workers are expensive, other people's workers are cheap, and globalisation meant that meant we were uncompetitive.
Okay.
There is a way around that, which has already been adumbrated, which is that we should produce a higher grade product. We should actually improve the standards so that we were producing steel for specific applications. We can't just sit around and think that we're going to be just doing girders like everybody else. Now, other people are going to say, well, we're already doing these higher grade products. Well, what we've got to do is learn to market them. You can't just sit around whinging that other people are outselling you.
Okay, now hold on, Nigel. No. I'll go to you. No, Nigel, hold on.
We must help our industries with
the man there with spectacles and a blue shirt, aren't you?
Thank you. I've got 4 children. If it turns out that one or more of them isn't academic, what should I advise them to do with the death of manufacturing in this country? My dad made cars, his dad was a printer, and his dad made watches, but what would it be to do for my children?
What do you do?
Academic. I'm a teacher, so I am academic, fortunately.
Okay, and you sir at the back then, the secretary from the back.
I was a steelworker during the strike of 79-80, and with all due respect to the panel, we heard a lot of the same rhetoric then. What I think that they failed to understand, we talk about spending the £80 million retraining people. To do what? When British Steel closed, it's not just the steel workers that are affected. I know they're the focus of the attention at the moment, but it's the shop round the corner won't have any customers, the pub up the road won't have any customers, the travel agent won't have any customers. You will constrict the economic breath out of that town, and we in Grimsby know, because it happened to us with the fishing industry. We've been through this. You don't understand what you're going to do to that town by not stepping in with real help. Not just lip service and training them all to be telephone sanitisation engineers or whatever. They need real help, not lip service, and you're not offering that.
You said you were a steel worker, yes?
Yes, I worked before I went to university.
How did you retrain?
I did the job for a year while I was waiting to go to university, so I already had something to go on to.
Okay. And you start there. Yes, I'll come to you in a second, Michelle. Yes, you in the co-tie.
It's nice to hear people talking about energy costs. Mr Farage and other people mentioned about energy costs. While we were throwing loads of money at subsidies for wind farms and so on, France was building nuclear power stations, left, right and centre, and now their costs of energy are about half of what ours are. It's a good point there.
Alan Johnson, what do you make of that point? Do you think our energy policy under Labour as well as under the coalition is just wrong?
France are going to be building out nuclear power stations as well.
Why weren't we building them? Why didn't we build them?
We should have.
Didn't we build the first nuclear power station in the world?
Yeah, we should have been rebuilt. We should have been renewing our nuclear power stations much earlier. There's absolutely no question of that. Listen, can I come to Nigel? Every issue I think we discussed today, the problem will be Europe.
Well, it is.
No, it's not.
Well,
no, it's not.
Why won't you admit it?
No, it's not. Because it's not.
Why won't you admit it?
Because it's not, Nigel. Here's the basic problem here. The basic problem. First of all, Nigel says state aid rules. State aid rules we signed up to, incidentally, as part of the. No, of course you didn't. But as much to protect British industries. They don't say that state aid is debarred. They say that state aid has to be regulated. There are reasons why you can get state aid that other European countries have taken advantage of. At Redcar, they've actually got carbon capture and storage. They've got research and development, which could have meant that they would have got state aid. Nobody applied for state aid for Redcar. The other issue is, the problem is dumping. If every Scunthorpe steel worker worked for nothing, they would still not be able to provide steel as cheap as they're providing it in China. And the issue here is how best can we deal with that international problem. The Chinese president was over here this week. He says that Chinese steel works have closed because they're over capacity. No one can find any evidence of that. But the only way to deal with that effectively is internationally. Through the European Union, 500 million together, and through the World Trade Organization. Do you think, Nigel, seriously, that if Britain was on its own, that there would not be dumping on our market from China and we would be less able to deal with it, not more able
no,
to deal with it?
Leaving aside, if we were in control of our own trade policy and we had our own trade deal with China, if we thought China was behaving unfairly, we could put tariffs on their steel. As members of the European Union, we cannot do that.
All right, I just want to bring...
Can I come back to energy at some point,
I want to come back to... Yeah, I want to come back to a point you made about Germany. Do you accept his point that the German steel industry is doing better?
No, because
in all kinds of ways and not losing...
Nigel doesn't understand what's happening in Germany. I'm chemical... I tell you what, I can explain to you.
Well, aren't we lucky to have you on tonight?
Just
My goodness me.
Hold on, Nigel. Germany decided, after Fukushima, to close down all their nuclear power stations. Right? They realised, actually, solar and wind is not enough because you need a base level of power. That is why they're having to invest very rapidly to deliver that base level of power. That's a whole other thing. I want to go back to the gentleman at the back who talked about what other jobs are out there. Now, I told you I'm a chemical engineer. Right? I believe in engineering in our country. In my constituency, we've got Jaguar Land Rover, we've got other automotive sectors. We produce a car every 20 seconds in the UK. We export those cars all over Europe to the rest of the world.
What's this got to do with the steel?
I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you in a second that we have got manufacturing in this country thriving. Yeah. If the steel industry will actually survive and will continue to thrive in the UK because of the support that the government will offer it, the support that I've already talked about.
Well,
procurement.
That needs to happen very quickly, though.
I don't disagree with you.
But you're saying it will survive, but what you're saying is it's not surviving.
No.
It's not surviving.
What you're seeing...
Closing.
Well, some are closing. Others, Tata is not closing.
No,
right?
but there's so
they're
many
having to
jobs
scale
that-
back
1 in 6 now.
because
1 in 6 jobs are
I
at risk in this
I don't
sector.
disagree with you.
They are.
But this is a crisis in the steel industry
No,
because of oversupply
it's not.
globally.
No,
That's
the
the
steel
thing.
industry is a symptom of what is happening to heavy manufacturing in Britain. As I told you, our aluminium industries, our cement industries, our refining industries, they're being destroyed because we're giving them
Because of
energy that is simply too expensive. And what I'm asking for is to give British heavy industries a level playing field, and then we can compete.
Thank you.
And then we can
All right.
succeed.
I want to go to you, sir.
I believe it's a matter of public knowledge that the Prime Minister has local connections to Scunthorpe. Perhaps he should take a leaf out of Lord Tebbutt's book and get on his bike, which is hopefully made of British steel, get up to Scunthorpe. I believe he may have a slow puncture because there's a community up there that need his support. I've yet to see a local politician or a national politician come out in support of the people of Scunthorpe, and it's diabolical that they haven't.
And I'd like to go back to that. I'd like to get back to Tracy, who put the original question. What do you make of what you've heard so far, and what's your view?
I just hear ifs, whens, buts. When's it actually going to happen? You know, by the time we've all debated what potentially we could do, we may be shut. I work actually at Tata, which is at Scunthorpe, and I can see this every day. You know, I work with these people, the 900 at Scunthorpe, they're potentially going to, well, they will be losing their job. I also work with, alongside the people up near Glasgow that will be losing their job. It's 1,200 people. It's just heartbreaking.
It is. And what we need to do, by the way, is we need to try and prevent these situations from happening. We need to try and move away from monopolised employments where you've got whole communities, towns, cities that are wholly dependent on one massive employer. Government needs to be sitting there now and looking at where are the risk areas, where do we need to be encouraging more enterprise into, which cities, which towns, what can we do to stimulate those economies?
The North East is the fastest area in terms of job creation in our country. The North West is exporting more than the rest of the UK. So we've got some good things
shaking your head
that are
at that. I'll bring you in at the moment. Go on, you have to convince him. Well, he's shaking his head as you speak.
That's the data, that's the facts. That is the reality on the ground. The fastest job creation
is
in the North. It's not London. It's not London.
But is it because it's the fastest loss of jobs?
No,
therefore it's the fastest
because
job?
we've been backing entrepreneurs, backing business,
Right.
reducing corporation tax down to 19%, coming further down. That's why you create an environment for people to build businesses. You get businesses started.
Okay.
You get people investing.
Facts can be made to suit anything.
What's that?
You can pick a fact out of the air and it can be made to suit your argument. The fact is,
reducing corporation tax down to 19%, coming further down. That's why you create an environment for people to build businesses. You get businesses started.
Okay.
You get people investing.
Facts can be made to suit anything.
What's that?
You can pick a fact out of the air and it can be made to suit your argument. The fact is, we're very quick to privatise a bank when it's going to go under, but not manufacturing industry. For 1/3 of what you gave to the banks, for 1/3 of what we gave to the banks, we could have kept steel going for the next 50, 60 years.
Okay. I'm going to move on. I'm sorry. Go on then, quickly. Yeah, the man in the middle in brown there. Can you go to him? Yes.
If we sat there listening to you, everything's all rosy, it's fine. You're saying, you know, the price of steel is going to go back up, everything's fine soon, and we're scaling back. These are real people who've lost their jobs here and now. This is what we're talking about, not soon it'll be okay. Like David said, once Redcar's shut, it's shut. It's never opening again, that's it. End of.
Yeah.
But we're just talking about what will happen soon. This is the here and now and real people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Right, we've got inevitably many other questions.
Not all steel workers are manual labourers. I have got an education behind me. We have lots of very highly educated people who I work with. At the present moment, I see my only option is I'm going to up sticks, leave the area and go and work in the nuclear industry. Because that's where the jobs are, because that seems to be the only thing that we see in the newspaper.
For the Chinese?
For the Chinese.
Well, we'll come to it. And the French. All right, thank you very much. Well, now, just before we go to the next question, I should just give our destinations